And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook for this Friday, the 4th of July, 2025. We start with the state of the sea ice. The ice is melting off now finally along the Arctic coast, especially the Beaufort Sea coastline from Utqiagvik all the way over to the Mackenzie River. And we're starting to see now more in the way of some opening water all along the coast line, and plenty of open water in here through the heart of the lower Chukchi. The only thing to kind of keep in mind, one, we've had very warm temperatures north slope and across the Brooks Range. Temperatures in the 70s and 80s. That heat will continue into this weekend. Hottest days Friday, Saturday, and then as we get into Sunday, maybe not quite as warm, but there's going to be a strong cold front coming down from the Arctic Ocean, and that's going to be sweeping northwest to southeast Monday into early Tuesday, and that's going to bring in a return of some much colder temperatures compared to 70s and 80s. We're looking at least at a 20, maybe even as much as a 30-degree temperature drop coming up. And then there's even the potential along the spine of the Brooks Range. There could be a little wet snow along and with the passage of that front early Tuesday morning. So quite a change coming up after this heat. Now, the weather map later this Friday night and Saturday morning, we have an area of low pressure just northeast of Dutch Harbor. That is going to be heading east and northeastward up into the western Gulf for Saturday. That energy translates east-northeastward. Combination of a weak system here southwest of Haida Gwaii and the secluded front are going to push another round of moisture, showers, and areas of rain along the Gulf Coast this weekend. And it'll really get wet, especially the northeastern Gulf Coast into the Panhandle Sunday and for Monday, looking to be rather wet days. Elsewhere along the west coast, still another generally dry and very warm one. There could be a few scattered showers and thunderstorms along areas of Norton Sound come Saturday afternoon. We have this thermal low because of the warm, or I should say hot temperatures. There's areas of the central interior that could see highs 85 to near 90 degrees on Saturday afternoon. We also have red flag warnings for extreme fire danger, central eastern interior, and we have heat advisories, parts of the North Slope, Brooks Range, Seward Peninsula, Middle Yukon, Upper Yukon. So it's just full-on summer thanks to a powerful ridge of high pressure, very warm ridge of high pressure in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere centered over the Brooks Range, North Slope, and Arctic coast. And as we get into Sunday, we will find that low energy translating up into the western Gulf with the front weakening, but pumping more moisture all along the Gulf Coast, especially Panhandle on up through Yakutat. And further west, we have a low that'll be scooting by toward the east-southeast here of the Aleutians Sunday afternoon. And that cold front that's going to be dropping southeastward out of the Arctic Ocean is still kind of up and beyond this banner, but that'll be making a play come Monday afternoon. We'll see that front pushing into the northwest mainland. So marine forecast for Saturday, July 5th for the long holiday weekend. Southeast south winds 10-15 knots for the inner channels. Generally waves a couple of feet. Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, maybe 2-3 feet, Metlakatla. Otherwise, pretty variable light winds, 5 knots, swells 3-4 feet off the outer coast, mainly southeast winds along Prince of Wales Island at maybe 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot waves. On Sunday, south-southeast winds, 10 knots for the inner channels, waves a foot or two. For areas along the outer coast, look for south winds south of Craig there. More southeasterly off of Port Alexander, Sitka, Cross Sound, and then turning easterly, maybe picking up to 25 knots off Cape Suckling, waves 4-5 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, some stronger winds Saturday at the entrance of Cook Inlet at Kennedy Entrance. East winds to 30 knots, east winds along the outer Kenai coast. So that's where some of the stronger winds, because we have a frontal system pushing up from the southwest and the gradient tightening through this area. So we do expect some stronger winds there. Prince William Sound, though, just variable winds, a foot or two at, with 10-knot winds there. Upper Cook, Middle Cook Inlet, northeast to east winds, 10 knots, waves maybe 3-4 feet. For Sunday, across the board, winds will have come up, but not quite as strong there at the the entrance here of Cook Inlet. Easterly winds at 20 knots, 3-4 foot waves. We'll have easterly winds to 20 knots, Prince William Sound. Outside of Hinchinbrook entrance to Kayak Island, east winds of 25 knots, waves 6 to 7 feet. And then upper Cook Inlet, northeast winds to 20 knots, turning northwesterly there around and north of Anchor Point. And we're looking at waves 2 to 3 feet for Sunday. Now, along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds will be easterly 20 to 25 knots around Kodiak Island. And as we go down along the peninsula, we do have that area of low pressure kind of splitting the energy across the lower part of the Alaska Peninsula. So variable winds there only around 10 knots. But ahead of this front, winds will be easterly, generally 20 to 25 knots, strongest there within Shelikof Strait, where waves could be 5-6 feet. Sunday, winds a little bit more of a mixed bag. Northeast winds, Shelikof Strait, 15 knots, 2-3 foot waves. East-southeast winds, 15 knots off of Akiak and Kodiak City. Waves maybe 4 or 5 feet. Variable 10-knot winds, Sand Point down to False Pass, waves a few feet there. And then east winds, Bristol Bay, 15 knots, becoming more southwesterly, especially get there north of Cold Bay. Waves on the Bering side, generally a couple of feet. Winds will be rather light and variable across the Aleutians on Saturday, only 10 knots. On Alaska, Nikolsky, more westerly, Atka to Adak. And then as we get back out toward Kiska-Shimia, the Bering side, variable winds at 10 knots, but kind of the winds splitting at 15 knots there, either side of Kiska. And then on Sunday, there's that other little low that's going to be scooting along just south of the Aleutian chain. So ahead of it, it's got enough wind. It has enough pressure gradient. Winds will be southerly, southeasterly, turning easterly at 30 knots from south of Unalaska through Nikolsky to Atka. And then as we get Adak to Kiska, the wind will be northeast to north 25 to 30 knots. And then as we get further west, Kiska to Shimia, winds will be northerly 15 to 25 knots. And along the southwest coast, we have northeast winds to 20 knots out of Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, and St. Matthew. Easterly winds to 15 knots, the Pribilovs, with waves maybe 4 or 5 feet. North winds here in that wider expanse of Norton Sound between Imanik and Nome, with waves of 3 feet. And then northeast to east winds, 15 knots with waves 2-3 feet there along the outer Yukon coast. And for Sunday, we are looking for east-southeast winds, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay at 15 knots. Variable winds around 10 knots, the Pribilof, St. Paul, St. George, but northwest winds 20 knots out there at St. Matthew, and then only 5-knot winds along the lower Yukon coast, Hooper Bay, but becoming west-northwest 10 to 15 knots as you get up toward Imanik, Stebbins, St. Michael, with waves of 2 to 3 feet. And then through the Bering Strait along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and the north side of St. Lawrence Island, north winds 15 to 20 knots on Saturday. As we go up the Chukchi, north to west winds 10 to 15 knots, and then winds Utqiagvik through Prudhoe Bay, Kaktovik, generally northeast to east at around 10 knots. Still a fair amount of ice in place, but we are at least getting some opening water develop. And then Sunday, we're going to start to see more of a northerly wind taking shape here in the Chukchi Sea in response to that colder air, going to begin to start heading southeastward across the mainland. So winds will be west through northerly 10 to 15 knots, Kaktovik through Utqiagvik, but notice those north winds increase to 20 knots here through the middle Chukchi Sea off of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope with waves 3-4 feet. And then along the north side of St. Lawrence Island, we're expecting northwest winds of 15 knots, and then Wales to Port Clarence, generally north winds of 15 knots, and waves in this end south of the Bering Strait for Sunday, waves generally running 2 to 3 feet.